Kevin, would you mind getting the door? Okay. Myself, tiny picture. Welcome, everyone, to the Publishing Triangle's Outspoken series, the May edition. My name is Greg Newton. I'm the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Don Jokum. And tonight we're being helped out by Kevin, who's our volunteer. And because we are an all-volunteer organization, we ask for donations. Donations and sales keep this boat afloat. So I'm going to pass the bag around. If you're able to throw something in there, great. If not, that's okay too. You can also make a donation at BGSQD on Venmo. That's the QR code here. So I'll pass that around. And if you'd prefer to support us by buying books, that's a wonderful thing to do. So you have many options, is what I'm saying. I'm going to adjust this a little. So, our regular bookstore hours are Wednesdays through Sunday from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open late for events like this. And you all are getting a wonderful preview of our next exhibition, which is opening on Friday. Dyke Plus Art House in Philadelphia has put together this exhibition of work by over 60 lesbians over the age of 40. So we're super excited about this beautiful show and hope you'll come back and check it out when this screen is not blocking some of the work. Before we get started, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement and a call for a ceasefire. And because today is the 76th anniversary of the Nakba, I had a few words to say about that, but I will eventually shut up. So fear not. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community House's Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. We also want to recognize that today, May 15th, is the 222nd day of Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people, funded by our tax dollars and enabled by our government's unwavering support. We hope that you will join us in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire, an end to the siege, and an end to the occupation in order to stop the collective punishment of Palestinians and to ensure the swift delivery of desperately needed food, water, medicine, fuel, and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. And I wanted to briefly mention that May 15th is also the day when Palestinians across the globe are marking the 76th anniversary of the Nakba, which means catastrophe in Arabic, when according to the Palestinian historian Abdelrazak Takriti, close to 900,000 Palestinians were forced out or massacred during Israel's founding, which is being celebrated inside Israel with calls to ethnically cleanse and settle the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank. I wanted to share a brief excerpt from Takriti's remarks on today's episode of Democracy Now! I always say, this is Takriti speaking, we have to apply 4 principal rules to Nakba education. The first point, when we're dealing with the Nakba education, is to insist that the Nakba happened and to reject denialism in all its forms. Secondly, we need to insist on the fact that the Nakba is continuing. We have to understand that this is a colonial continuum. This is a structural process. It is not an event. And what we're seeing now in Gaza is very much connected to what happened in 1948. Thirdly, the Nakba must be stopped. So it's not enough to commemorate. It's not enough to talk about it. We have to stop it right now. And that means the first step to doing that is to stop the genocide in Gaza. And fourthly, it must be reversed. The Nakba must be reversed. And that means restoring Palestinian political and national rights, not only dealing with this as a humanitarian question, despite the gravity of the humanitarian situation. The humanitarian situation is a byproduct of the denial of the Palestinian political and national rights from the beginning of the British colonialism to this very day. That ends my sermon for today, and I will now bring up Rob Burns from the Publishing Triangle. Please give him a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, we have 10 minutes, so. I am thrilled that we have 7 great writers joining us, 5 in person, 2 on the Zoom boxes. And this is exemplative of what the Publishing Triangle is all about. There are established voices, there are new voices, there are award-winning voices, there are people that are just starting out in the biz. You know, well, everyone will get jaded eventually, but in the short term, though, I mean, the Publishing Triangle, this is not your father's Publishing Triangle. We are out there we are out there, we're taking people that are just getting out of college and are starting their poetry careers. We're taking, we are promoting people that have been publishing for a half century. And so I'm glad that this is a nice mix that we have tonight, although no one is old, except for me. Our first reader tonight is Emily Jo. Emily was born in Michigan and lives in New York. Girlfriends was her first book, and it earned her 2 nods from the Publishing Triangle this year. She was a finalist for the prestigious Farrell Grumley Award for LGBTQ plus fiction, and she won the Leslie Feinberg Award for trans and gender variant literature. Well done, Emily. Please welcome Emily Jo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thank you everyone who's joining us virtually. I'm going to sit. Okay. I wrote a book, Girlfriends, collection of short stories, mostly about trans women in their early 20s. I'm going to read a little bit from the first story in that book, which is called Affection. And I guess I'm going to start like a few pages in. Pretty much all you have to know is that the main character, Marina, just arrived at sort of like a sort of like, you know, post college layabout sort of art party in a like medium-sized town. And she's just gotten a little bit more stoned than she intended to be. She sat back down and tried to just let her mind rest neutrally on the scene in front of her. At least I'm here, she thought. And then, how hard can it be to just sit there and wait for something to happen? She found that she could calm herself, prevent everything from floating away by focusing on the body language of the people right in front of her. 2 gay-looking guys and 1 vaguely non-binary looking person with an undercut wearing a silver jumpsuit. She didn't stare, but let her eyes sort of drift over the trio as they moved their hands, drank from red plastic cups, adjusted their bodies. I said, "What's your name?" She blinked. The silver jumpsuit person was looking at her. Marina said. Silver jumpsuit leaned in and widened their eyes. "Oh, you're Sylvie's friend, the writer." Yeah. "What do you write?" said one of the gay guys. The other one had run off. Marina got a fresh look at him and noticed that he was very attractive. Her eyes ascended from his hands, up his long, thin arms fluted with muscle and spotted with freckles, to his shoulders, bare in a black tank top. There were little red flowers embroidered on the thin strip of fabric that covered his collarbones. He had a face as square as a Roman statue and a nest of brownish curls that got in his eyes. Poetry, Marina said. Was it possible that he would be into girls? This is all set off in parentheses. Was it possible that he'd be into girls? Maybe she wasn't like grown enough yet for him to be like categorically uninterested. It's not like in a sane world her pronouns would be the determining factor there. She let herself fall into that hypothetical. She was wearing a dress and had long hair that was up in a braided bun, but well, that was about all. But then she had the thought that men and women are beautiful in different ways. It's not like your credits transfer over exactly. What kind of poetry? He said. I mean, I'm not writing. I'm not really writing. I mean, I'm not really writing anything right now. But I did write poetry before. Sorry, I'm really high and I didn't get your name, either of your names. He laughed and held out his hand. She felt what she imagined to be an electric charge go up her forearm as his fingers curled under her hand. Nico. He's Nicky sometimes, Silver Jumpsuit said. Not right now, he said, smiling as if embarrassed. I'm Marina, full-time, Marina said. Silver Jumpsuit nodded. I'm Aubrey, they, them, theirs. Marina nodded back. How do you two know parents, the host? I work with her at the gallery, Nico said. Oh, I show my work there a lot, Aubrey said. Their voice had shades of vocal fry on the edges. I'm a photographer, and Nico and Perrin are basically the only actual gallerists in this town that show like art that takes risks right now. Cool, Marina said, unsure what the expected response was. I think I want to smoke a cigarette, Nico announced. Yeah, I'll come with, Aubrey said. He seemed bored. Marina looked at him again. Me too, she said. They went upstairs to a dim hallway and out to the roof through Perrin's bedroom window. Finally, Aubrey breathed into the hot night air. Ugh, a moment of calm. Amen to that, Nico said, sitting on the slope tiles and looking out into the deserted street. Before long, they were talking about something incomprehensible to Marina. He handed her his lighter. She lay on her back and watched an airplane passing between mackerel clouds way up there, all her being focused on its flickering track. Gradually, Aubrey's conversation with Nico dried up. They turned to Marina. So, like, what do you do now? They asked, if you used to be a poet. I think I'm still a poet, Marina said, not sitting up. I haven't forgotten how to do it. That's real, Aubrey said. Is the Nikki thing like your drag queen persona? Marina said, turning over to Nico. Yeah, from back when I lived in Chicago, he said. It's sort of becoming its own thing, though. Oh, Marina said. When the silence seemed to stretch out, she asked Aubrey if she could see their photographs. Aubrey obligingly pulled up their artist website on her phone. The pictures were arranged in a grid that moved when Marina swiped at the screen with her index finger. Black and white pictures of parts of naked bodies zoomed into closer than intimate distances to an abstracting closeness that rendered body parts as collections of shapes. A hand grabbed a thigh covered in flower tattoos, a hand held a knife flat to a torso, another hand held a mouth open, the rest of the head out of view. In most of them, she couldn't discern the number or gender of their subjects for all the overlapping limbs and indistinct layers of fabric covering and revealing by turns. Wow, these are intense, Marina said, flicking through the grid faster. That's the word everyone uses, Aubrey said with evident satisfaction. It's hard to describe their stuff, right? Nico said. Like, I don't know, so much art about bodies is so boring or self-congratulating. Like the artist expects a gold star for showing people doing uncomfortable things, even just for displaying the body. Aub is more interesting than that. Definitely, Marina said. When she looked up from the phone at Nico, she was surprised again by his beauty and looked back down, unseeing at Aubrey's art to disguise her eyes. Definitely, Marina said again. She gestured with her hands and continued. The scenarios that these people are in seem kind of dangerous or aggressive almost, but there's this sense of affection there, even if you don't get to see the whole person, or like the fact that you don't get to see the whole person, but you get to see their sense of affection, even if that affection is dangerous, you know? Aubrey smiled. Yeah, exactly, they said. Can you guess which ones are me? Nico said. Marina looked back at the phone. She picked one at random and looked between him and the phone. It was a photograph of someone's hairy, skinny torso with 4 female-looking hands palming it. He looked back at her with an expectant face, and she locked eyes with him for a moment. No, she said, and Aubrey laughed. One time when they had an opening, it was full of our friends pointing at the wall and going, that's me, Nico said. They bring the camera everywhere. I bet they have it tonight. Do you? Marina said. Oh yeah, Aubrey said, smiling and not looking at her. I take a lot of pictures at parties for just like myself, Instagram, you know. I don't do it that much anymore, but you know, I like to have the option. We could get more drunk and take pictures of each other, Nico said. Sure, Aubrey said. I'm not taking it out here though, and I don't really feel like taking it out downstairs. It's like as soon as I take that thing out, everyone's suddenly not being themselves, they're acting. I bet Karen would be fine with us using her bedroom if we wanted to just do the 3 of us. They crawled through the window and Nico sprawled out on Perrin's bed, his arms splayed behind him. The room was small and neat, museum postcards pinned to the walls, an incense burner next to a jewelry rack, and a little makeup mirror on the dresser, cream-colored bedding. Nico reached behind the bedpost and found a switch for some red LED lights that snaked around the top of the walls. Cute, Aubrey said approvingly as the room turned a deep computer red. Maybe keep the color in these for the first time in forever. Gray to red. Probably not, though. Keep those on. I like that kind of dim light. They finished attaching the lens to the camera and pointed it from across the room at Nico, who smiled a coy smile at it. Marina watched Aubrey get progressively closer to Nico's face with the camera lens until it was almost right up against it. Nico covered parts of his face with his hands and giggled while Aubrey sent pictures. Eventually, he grabbed the camera out of their hands with a single graceful gesture and took one with the flash on right in Aubrey's face when they tried to take it back from him. Oh, fuck you, Aubrey said, laughing. Here, you two can go amuse yourselves with that thing. Be back. If you break it, you owe me $600. I get it, Marina thought. This is fun. It's a game. Honestly, when you suggested this, I was worried that I'd have to get naked like everyone in those photographs, Marina said once Aubrey was gone. She sat on the floor facing Nico, who was still sitting on the bed. I mean, we could, he said. Display the body, Marina quoted, imitating Nico's lisp. It's kind of bullshit, but you have to believe in it for it to work, Nico said, aiming the camera lens at her. She instinctively started to cover her face, and then something in her made her drop her hands and stare dead on at the device. She had no idea what facial expression she was making. He snapped the shutter and the flash went off, blinding her. What's bullshit, she said, blinking. Getting naked for art? Yeah, he said, and just like in general, you have to suspend doubt. I feel like you're asking me to take off my clothes, Marina said recklessly. Knock yourself out, girl, Nico said, taking another picture with the flash off this time. Sure, Marina said, and before she could think, she had undone her bra and taken off her dowdy shirt dress. Let's do some nudes. He laughed. Okay, fine. I'm no Aubrey, but I'll try. They traded places, Nico on the floor and Marina standing next to the bed, the LED lights coloring her bare skin in deep mauve. Neither moved for a moment. The only solution to this situation was to move, she thought, and she was immobile. She experimentally covered her mouth with the back of her forearm, and Nico clicked the shutter once. She dropped her hand. He clicked the shutter again. Marina sat heavily on the bed, crossed and uncrossed her legs, cracked her neck, undid the swirly knot at the top of her head, and heard the small clattering of her hairpins bouncing off the wooden floor as her hair cascaded down the side of her face. She arched her back so that her ribcage protruded and her breasts disappeared. She craned her head way to the side. Click, click, click. Kept looking up and over the camera body at her, smiling. She smiled back, came close to laughing a few times, but kept herself in check. It took some practice to not flinch at the snap of the mechanism. Okay, she said finally. It could have been 5 minutes or an hour. She waved her hand at him and then lay down on the bed so she wouldn't have to look at the lens anymore. He snapped one last picture of her laying there in her panties and then walked over to the bed and lay down next to her. I feel like some of those are going to turn out good, he said. He was scrolling through something on his phone with one hand. Yeah, maybe, Marina said. Do you want to take some with me? He said. No, she said. She was suddenly tired of all of this and wanted to go home again, but she tried to sound simply disinterested. Okay, here, I'll do one, she said. She turned on her side and propped her elbow in the bed. She took the camera from him and took a picture of him looking at his phone. He turned to look at her, set the phone on the bed, and they were both laying there, looking at each other. The door opened. I need to take back the expensive thing I used to make my art, Aubrey announced. Sorry. Oh, Marina, you're naked. That's cool. The shame hit her belatedly, and she tried to cover her body with parents' blankets. I took some nudes of her, Nico said, still looking at whatever was on his phone. Oh, let me see, Aubrey said, taking the camera back from Marina. Oh, I love this one, they said, looking into the little screen. Yeah, I can edit these and send them to you. Sure, Marina said. She was sure she was red in the face. I really like these, Aubrey said. Nico and Marina both looked intently at them as they pressed buttons on the back of the camera. Then they looked up at the two of them, seemed to think, and cautiously raised the camera and took a picture of the two of them sitting side by side on the bed. Sorry, I should have asked, Aubrey said, lowering the camera, but you two just look like so good next to each other. I bet, Marina said softly. Thank you.
Emily Jo, thank you. Our next reader is a native New Yorker who's not here now. Faye Jacobs spent 30 years in Washington, D.C., working in journalism, public relations, and theater. She's the former publisher of A&M Books, a successor to the legendary Naiad Press. She's the author of 6 humorous story collections. The most recent, I hope I got that number right, Faye.
Yes.
Oh, good. Big Girls Don't Cry was published just last month by Bywater Books. Faye teaches classes in humor writing, editing, and memoir, and has written for the Washington Post, Baltimore Sun, The Advocate, Curb Magazine, and more. She lives in Rehoboth with Bonnie, the wonderful Bonnie, her wife of over 30 years, and a miniature schnauzer named Windsor. And by the way, Faye, first of all, she's hilarious, and she loves going out for a drink. But beyond that, she mentors writers, which I need to point that out. She is not like doing this in a bubble. She's bringing the next generation along. Please welcome Faye Jacobs.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll turn it so you can see your audience, Faye.
Oh, hi. Hi. Great. Okay. Well, unlike what Rob said, I am old. Okay. I am aging gracelessly. And my motto is that nothing is so bad if it's worth the story you can tell. Frankly, I've discovered that life is pretty much like a roll of toilet paper. The closer you get to the end, the faster it goes. Now, they say your 70s are the new 50s, but I'm not so sure. Some of my friends were so worried about COVID that they bought oxygen meters to clip to their fingers to test their oxygen levels. My wife and I borrowed one and passed it back and forth to see if we were still breathing. My God, we are passing around a medical device like we used to pass weed in a bong. But now my wife has two brand new knees, and I had a torn rotator cuff in my shoulder, and we both have been to physical therapy. This is where we see our friends now. We used to meet at dance clubs and bars, and now we see each other at physical therapy. My wife, Bonnie, comes home. Who'd you see today? She says, everybody. It's like half the golf league and 3/4 of the pickleball team. When I started shoulder therapy, they asked me my goal for recovery. My goal is to make the pain stop. That's it. I'm not going to have a career as a trapeze artist. I don't need full function back. I just want to lift the Cosmo to my mouth without screaming. And we even try to fix our brains. Now, I know you have seen those TV ads for Prevagen. I was thinking about starting on it until I found out that it cost $79.95 a bottle. I figured I didn't need it because I remembered that $79.95 is a lot of money. And we are older now, but by no means finished. It's wild because marriage equality didn't get here till 2015. We have spent the last decade going to weddings that we should have gone to in our 20s and 30s. These days, gay people have bachelor and bachelorette parties at well-known restaurants. When we were their age, we were lucky to meet at a mafia-run gay bar in a shitty neighborhood. By the time we had a bachelorette party, it was the early bird special at IHOP. Now, these kids have bridal registries too at Crate and Barrel. When Bonnie and I finally could marry, we registered at Costco for hearing aids. Actually, I don't see much difference in our behavior from years ago. Our people used to flee the bars at the shouts of police raid. Now all it takes is somebody announcing that it's 8:30. But having more birthdays hasn't stopped us. For my spouse's 70th birthday, I took her indoor skydiving. Have you ever heard of this thing? The place is called I Fly, which of course I interpreted as Bonnie flies. No way am I going into a 3-story tubular death trap where an enormous turbine blows 100-mile-an-hour wind to launch me up into the air. I'm just not doing it. Well, it turns out we had prepaid reservations for the both of us. So we had to wear these silly flight suits with helmets and goggles. Our instructor, dressed like Captain Marvel, showed us hand signals for straighten your legs, make an X with your body, and most importantly, chin up. Well, in my case, he meant chin up all of them. And if I didn't keep my chins up, I would crash to the net floor where the wind would give me a complimentary colonoscopy. It was scary. So Bonnie went first. Entering the 3-story tube with the instructor, he held out his arms as she leaned over them, raised her arms, and got sucked up like a 757, rising, twirling, laughing as she circled this tube over and over and over. She looked giddy and was in happy free fall. I was so impressed. When her time was up, she gently lowered her chin and glided down to a soft landing. I applauded as she gestured to me to take her hand towards the tube. I looked at this skinny captain marvel. Was he even capable of holding all of me up until I caught the wind beneath my wings? I didn't think so. I leaned, sort of spread-eagled, toward his outstretched arms, and whoosh, I was swept up, belly down, arms and legs flailing, and chin up to help me rise and minimize the turkey waddle over here. Unfortunately, my mouth was open, and it sent rivers of spittle across my face and G-forced up into my helmet. I flew, my flab wobbling, my arms flapping, stretched out like a jumping jack, thinking, oh my God, my heart is going to stop. For what seemed like an eternity, the sustained wind suspended me like a Boeing Airbus, my eyes watering, spit flying, and for one brief shining moment, I might have actually liked it. Given the okay to land, I lowered my chins, bent my legs, and prayed they were foaming the runway. I descended like the proverbial lead balloon. Wham! When I lurched out the door, you could see the tracks of my tears. Tufts of hair stuck up through the small holes in my helmet like a Venus flytrap. We drove home, laughing, high-fiving, and repeating our mantra. You don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. The next morning, I couldn't turn my neck or raise my arm to brush my teeth. My hair still looked like the bride of Frankenstein. I stared into the mirror. I fly, but not like I used to. Thanks for listening.
Legendary Faye Jacobs, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And hopefully Saints and Sinners next year.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's get all our body, and all of us that are, carrying, all of us that carry Medicare cards will get our
Right.
body parts together.
Okay,
Get
that's
down
good.
there.
That's good, thanks.
Speaking of Saints and Sinners, our next reader made his debut in Saints and Sinners this year. Actually, a couple of people did. 3 of you tonight. I'm picking up, Greg, you got to come down. I'm picking up people like left and right there. David Santos Donaldson is the author of the novel Greenland, a finalist for the 2023 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, the 2023 Publishing Triangle Edmund White Award for Debut Fiction, and Germany's Hot List 2023 Literary Prize. The Publishing Triangle Edmund White Award, obviously, that nomination was most important. David's writing has appeared in various magazines, including Poets and Writers, Literary Hub, Electric Literature, Shelf Awareness, The Rumpus, and the German literary magazine Geistenblüten, which I hope I said right. I did. Okay, I got a nod. Okay. Please welcome David Santos Donaldson.
If I put this here, was it gonna block the camera view?
No, it should be okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, so I'm gonna be reading as from my debut novel Greenland. And I'm lucky enough to have been invited here a couple times. So I've read a couple times, and usually what I do is I skip around and read little bits from different sections, because the novel is a novel within a novel. It's about a writer, a Black queer British Caribbean writer who was writing a novel about E.M. Foster and his first love affair with Muhammad El Adel. And as he's writing this novel, he also is writing from Muhammad's point of view, and he starts to sort of lose his mind and become merged with Muhammad. And so we have bits of his life and his thoughts, as well as the novel that he's writing. But I'm not going to do any of that today. Today, I'm just going to read from one section that you don't have to really have much background to know what's going on. And so it's from the point of view of the narrator, which is named Kip Starling, and he's just boarded a plane. He's not sure exactly where he's going. He calls himself a Nowherean, and he's on this nowhere vessel, but he's actually looking for a place, a wilderness, where he can go and find his real, true voice. But he's just ostensibly going to fly to London, but the plane ends up in Greenland.
Yeah.
As I approached my assigned seat inside the nowhere vessel, I noticed the passenger in the aisle seat is an older Black woman, probably in her 70s. She's wearing gold-framed wire glasses. Her head is wrapped in a yellow and white scarf. Around her shoulders, she has a white knit shawl that cannot hide her buxomness. Underneath it, I get a glimpse of a slightly tacky tiger print dress. Upon seeing her, my first association is of Aunt Jemima. Why does she have to wear that mammy-like scarf on her head? I ask myself. Instantly, I'm annoyed to be sitting next to her. Will people think we're related? That I'm that kind of Negro? Should I ask the flight attendant if I can switch to the empty seat in the row ahead of mine, next to the young blonde woman with an infant? Wouldn't that be preferable? And then, like a punch to the gut, I'm hit with a nauseating wave of shame. Who in the hell do I think I am? These are unforgettable thoughts. I squeeze past the older woman and take the window seat. As I stow my backpack under the seat in front of me, she looks up from her copy of The Economist and smiles. I return the smile, holding back an uncontrollable urge to cry from utter disgrace. The Economist. Clearly, this woman is not the stereotype I had believed her to be. I also now noticed, upon closer inspection, the old woman's yellow scarf is Hermes. If worn by Gloria Swanson, I would have immediately thought it chic and not a mammy's rag. And I think to myself, what if this Black woman didn't read The Economist or Hermes? What if she were a poor and uneducated woman? Would I have continued to devalue and be ashamed of her? I cringe at the thought. Yes, I'm infected with white supremacy. Nothing could be worse than having your greatest enemy trapped inside your own consciousness, the cancer of whiteness. I smile at the old woman now, trying to convey a profound apology. The old lady's smile seems polite, but she does not invite a conversation. She appears to be generally self-contained. I also detect a hint of Chanel No. 5 on her, my mother's favorite perfume. Then I notice she has a tiny scar cut through the left eyebrow like a scythe. It's odd, I think, because I have the exact same scar, only on the other side of my right eyebrow. Holiday trip? I ask, cozying into my seat, pressing my head firmly into the headrest. I'm trying to be friendly now, warm, still trying to make up for my sins. She smiles at my question blankly. Just going to a funeral, she says. Her voice is full and round, and her accent sounds vaguely Southern. Alabama, maybe? Just going to a funeral, she says, as if resigned to a tedious chore. A funeral, I say. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry? No. She lifts her hefty chins as if considering options, and then she looks down at her magazine again. It's okay. I hated the bitch. Oh, I make a funny imploding face, my lips and cheek. All right, then. Yes, she gives a one-note high, kind of exalted whoof. Then, after a few seconds, she half whispers to me in her surprisingly smooth and seductive voice, with that tone of a late-night radio host. You know, Sugar, you kind of look like that. You kind of sound like that actor, Idris Elba. I don't believe I speak very much like Idris Elba, but I don't correct her. I only smile back. Thank you, I say. Then we have a brief chapter called Long Live Idris Elba. It's like an ode to Idris Elba, which we're not going to read tonight because I want to. But I like it, but I don't want to fit in the rest of this little section. So then we're back on the plane now. Out of the corner of my eye, I see that my travel companion's shifting. I sense her puzzling her face. I sense her puzzling over my face. She seems to be wrestling with an idea, her watery brown eyes flitting around as she peers over her glasses. She lays her economist flat on her lap. So, what about you? Been traveling to New York? Are you flying back home now? Just traveling, I say. Just traveling, huh? She seems to have clocked my feigned nonchalance, detected my deeper struggle about my final destination. That sounds very mysterious, young man. Yeah, well, I say with a bit of cheek, it's no more mysterious than your dead bitch or your funeral you're going to. I smile and raise my eyebrows. Oh, she was so annoying, she says, giggling like a naughty girl. She describes how her daughter's dead mother-in-law was a terrible racist and didn't want her son marrying a Black American woman, even though her daughter graduated from Harvard, a fact that she's not bragging about, she makes clear to me, since she and her ex-husband, Mr. Garuda, now deceased, had preferred that their daughter go to Howard University instead, just as they had both done. She herself taught anthropology at Spelman College for over 30 years. Historically, all Black colleges are not obsolete, she says, not in America where white spaces still taint Black bodies' sense of humanity. And anyway, she goes on, as far as her daughter's awful mother-in-law is concerned, you'd think that with the Prince Harry just marrying Meghan Markle in the blackest damn wedding England ever seen, that the English bitch would at least have a reason for pause, but no, not her. As she continues to catalog the number of unforgivable slights her poor daughter has endured from this insufferable mother-in-law, my mind wanders off a bit. I'm still listening to her, but her voice has a hypnotic quality. As I feel myself somehow I'm still listening, and I feel myself somehow transported by her melodious tone. It crosses my mind that she may actually be trying to put me into a trance, like a magician or a hypnotist. But no, that couldn't be possible, and why would she do that? But still, carried on the waves of her smooth voice, I'm slowly slipping into another plane of consciousness. More and more, I'm absorbed by the dreamlike airplane world. This too is my nowhere zone. No matter where we come from, we all follow the same rules here in airplane world, where none of us are natives, and instead of policemen to serve and protect us, we have flight attendants. I'm impressed with the attendants as they swish past in their almost stylish uniforms. As a child, I adored what we call stewardesses. I wanted to be one. What gay boy born before the 90s hasn't fantasized about this vocation? Their glamour has faded nowadays, but as a child, I thought they were Amazon goddesses of the sky. Their perfumes as they waft past me lulled me into the childlike trance of blissful obedience. Tonight, I imagine them as stylish priestesses, making their procession up the church aisle as we, the congregants, worship respectfully in our pews. Of course, there are the first and business classes, echelons apart, behind the curtains that will remain closed at all times. While rigorously kept out of sight, we in world traveler economy class happily accept this inequality. We know we did not pay more than 10 times the price for pre-flight hot towels, fully recumbent seats, cheese plates, and champagne. But why do we accept this so easily and with a kind of old world fatalism, when back on Earth, we balk at these blatant inequalities? Why indeed, I hear my elderly traveling companion say. I'm sorry, I'm confused. I didn't know if she's read my mind or if I've been speaking out loud without realizing it. She leans in confidentially, and with a deep half whisper, she says, I'll tell you why. We accept it because we know in here we are closer to death than ever. We have no control over our lives in this airplane, and it's sobering. We all pray to get out of here alive. Who cares if they have champagne behind the curtains? If the plane plunges into the Atlantic, we all die together. But this is what I like about flying, she continues, with a wicked smile. And for the first time, I notice the faint outline of a mustache, little wisps of gray hair growing on her full lips. I like that we're forced into a place where we're all the same. We must face the danger of our existences together. We must value each breath of oxygen, respect the given rules, respect each other, break the same bread together. And when we land, we even applaud together because we have faced death, the great equalizer, and we have prevailed. And also, we've felt our humanity, our human frailty, our need for each other. And this is how life is. We realize every one of us is on the same journey from here to there, and it is a precarious, miraculous crossing for us all. What she says about feeling at one with everyone on board is also making me sad. I can't relate. I feel instead as if we're all strapped into our individual little pods, isolated in our despair. I suppose if I were not busy pretending to be immortal, free from death's grip, that maybe I might actually want to reach out for another. Perhaps the old lady is right. But I turn away from her anyway. I want to look out the window. I don't want to look at her anymore. I'm believing more and more that her voice was actually putting me into some kind of trance. Look at what happened. I ended up talking out loud without even being aware of it. How else would she have answered the question in my head? I don't feel safe even thinking around her. No, I don't want to talk anymore. I close my eyes to calm myself. I think of tranquil things like floating on the ocean. I try to concentrate on the big questions looming ahead of me. Where will I go to find my wild wilderness? Where indeed, I hear my traveling companion say. I look at her to verify she is indeed talking to me. This time, I'm sure I have not spoken a word out loud. Is she really reading my mind? My heart beats like a drum. I'm sorry, I say. I don't understand. What did you say? She turns to me earnestly now, knitting her silver eyebrows. I am not particularly a good person, she says, still in her hypnotic half whisper. Everyone assumes I'm sweet, she continues, but I'm not sweet. Must be my big breast. Gives me a warm, maternal appearance, I suppose. The mammy aura, as you know. But I can tell you the truth. I'm not a warm person. I'm not a bad person exactly, but I don't like people much. Have you heard that quote from the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay? I love humanity, but I hate people. That's me. Why is it so hard to love people specifically? Is there a place we could go where we can live free of guilt for not liking people enough? Where we go to, for those of us who dare to leave behind that which none of us should ever take for granted, the love of another? Shouldn't a perfect love be without attributes at all, not the particulars of this person or that? Well, that's something I could do, perhaps. My heart sinks in my chest. Is she some kind of psychic? And then the old woman turns to me and whispers into my ear with a deep southern voice. Look at me, she says. Tell me, what do you really see? Despite my reluctance, I turn toward the old woman face to face. I notice nothing different except her gaze seems a bit more intense. Be careful when you summon the dead, she whispers into my ears. They'll come. No matter the century or the distance. In the wilderness, there is no time, no space, no orientation, but one, no duality. And then she deepens her voice even more. You have summoned the dead. What are you talking about? Who are you really? I demand. She smiles wryly, and she makes a puckered frown as if to say, what does it matter? Before she leans in close again with that voice that says, I am the one, thus come. Look closely at me and see. She whispers. In a flash, as if her face is suddenly illuminated by a spasm of lightning, I see my own face staring back at me, a mirror. My heart drops. I turn away as fast as I can. I must be hallucinating. Whoever this old woman is, she's scaring the shit out of me. If I'm hallucinating, I have to get a grip and make this stop right away. Before I can make the conscious decision, my body is already in motion. It must be the ancient survival technique. Without a thought, I unbuckle myself, jump up with my laptop and backpack in tow, and squeeze past the old lady without looking at her. I quickly take the empty seat in the row ahead of mine. I buckle myself in again and finally sigh with relief. I have escaped her.
David, excuse me, David Santos Donaldson. Thank you. I need you before we go further, quickly acknowledge that Gerard Cabrera is here from the Board of Directors. I mentioned Gerard specifically because the Publishing Triangle is comprised of is run by 9 volunteer members. Not a single person gets a dime. In fact, we often spend many dimes to keep the organization going. So we urge your membership, $40 a year. You can go to publishingtriangle.org. There's a drop-down menu for membership, and you can do by PayPal or send us a check. I stopped at the mailbox on my way over here. There were no checks, but it's okay. You should also think of supporting the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is and the Publishing Triangle, by the way, is a 501c6. So we are not tax deductible. But the the Bureau of General Services Queer Division is a 501c3. Your book purchases are taxable, but your donations to the Bureau are tax deductible. So, just think of that when you're thinking about how you want to spend your money in what I'm hoping, I'm not predicting, but hopefully will be at least we have 7 more months guaranteed, okay? So I get worried sometimes. Going back, okay, roll this back a second. Back to Saints and Sinners Literary Conference in New Orleans back at the end of April, or back at the end of March, sorry. I met someone who's about to read next. They had a literary competition, short fiction competition that was judged by Trevor Healy, who is, of course, an amazing writer in and of himself. And one of the people he selected as a finalist will be reading next. Alfred P. Doblin has spent most of his professional career working as a journalist, most notably as the editorial page editor of the Record, the Bergen Record in New Jersey. He's a 4-time GLAAD Media Awards nominee for Outstanding Newspaper Columnist, and this year, as I just mentioned, he was one of 2 runners-up. I didn't mention this actually, because I didn't specify the number. 2 runners-up in the Saints Sinners 2024 short fiction contest for a short story, Holy Communion, and now Alfred will read from that. Alfred.
You can move. Yeah, I think I'm gonna. Yeah, just get rid of it. Throw it out. Yep. Lower it down. I'm using bigger print because I am old. I could show you my Medicare card. Holy Communion, what you need to know about the story, it's set in a bar that might look something like, say, Julius's, a bar in the West Village. There's no grill. It is the day of a memorial service for a regular named Davy, who was a writer. He's died sometime past where the story begins. He died of natural causes, but he was found after many days in his apartment. The regulars in the bar have all sort of collected for like a de facto kind of memorial after a memorial service, and they gather together. What you need to know, the name of the bar is The Crow. The owner of the bar, who is behind the bar, his name is John. The man who's died, Davy, his brother's name is Alan. And one of the characters is somewhat of a barfly, an older man, and this is a story about older gay people, named Tommy, who occasionally just makes noises as he's lost into his drink. We all die alone, Alan said. Yeah, we do, John said. At that last moment, we're alone. But up to that final second, we need to feel not afraid. I pray to God, and I don't know if I believe in God. Davy did not feel afraid. We're all afraid. All the time we're afraid. A voice from the far corner said. It was Tommy. He was putting all his weight on his hands so he could stand up. His stool fell backwards onto the floor like a sucker-punched fighter who never saw it coming. We come here because we're afraid of what Davy was afraid of. We don't say it. We make jokes. We look for a lover or a friend. And when we don't find him, we find the Jack, ever dependable Jack, always willing to succumb. When I was a boy, my mother would tell me that I should sing when I was afraid. I would sing in my room when my dad would get drunk and start throwing things against the walls and the floor. He started with books or dishes and then moved on to my mother. I'd sit in my room singing quietly all the Irish songs my mom would sing at the piano we had in the living room. She and I would sing before my dad came home or when he was out. I still remember those songs. I'm going to sing one for Davy. John walked over to Tommy. That's a real nice thought, Tommy, but maybe you should sit down. I've been sitting for the past 30 years, he snapped. You never liked Davy. You don't have to like the living, but you have to respect the dead. All of us know that better than most. How many friends gone? How many assholes who annoyed us are gone? No one wants even them dead. In my family, we sang at the gatherings after wakes and funerals. It's respect. Tommy started to sing Danny Boy. The key was too high. The regulars began to wince at what was to come, but no one would stop Tommy. Instead, Tommy stopped himself. I can do better. I will start again. He did, and in a better key. As Tommy began to sing again, the men were surprised by his slightly hoarse Irish tenor. It was not a bad voice after decades of the Jack. It must have been extraordinary once. As he sang, Tommy kept one hand on the bar for balance, but he didn't appear to need it. John wondered if perhaps Tommy had been a singer, one of those young people who arrived in New York with a dream and eventually traded it for a bottle. He looked at Tommy standing almost erect as his voice, strong and powerful, filled every crevice of the crow. And unlike his patrons, who could never quite touch it, for a brief second as he listened to the closing of the cliched Irish song, John touched what he thought was the face of God, shivered. Then there was silence. Tommy looked back for his stool, his companion on the floor. Someone pulled it up and Tommy sat down, his body returning to its more familiar state. His face was hard to read. The emotion so present while singing had already faded. Tommy stared at his empty glass. It was empty as well. The last bit of who he might have been poured out in his tribute to Davy. It had filled the air. The traces of his voice still hovered above the bar, slowly dissipating. When it was gone, there would be nothing special left. No refills for an empty man. Tommy needed a drink. This is on me, John said as he stood across from Tommy. So are the rest of them today. You are amazing, you know that. Tommy looked up from the glass at John as he poured. Tommy didn't respond. Whatever Tommy was thinking, if he was thinking behind the promise of an afternoon of free drinks, no one could tell. He lifted the full glass, took a sip, and then faded back into the perpetual twilight of the crow. Alan was struggling with his emotions. The song was unexpected. Everything about the crow was unexpected and unfamiliar. The bar was just like his dead brother. I wish I had known him better, Alan said. I was the older one by 3 years. I always knew he was smarter than me, more at ease with people, and I figured out early on that he was gay. Our mom during the winter would call out to us from the kitchen as we came in from playing in the snow. Coco, she would say, and Davy would reply, Chanel. My mom never quite got the joke. It embarrassed the hell out of me when he did it in front of my friends. It wasn't easy having a little gay brother. It wasn't easy being gay, John said, feeling more like himself now. I know you're right, but it was hard understanding why he wanted to stay in the city all the time. It's not like I didn't want him to come spend time with me and my family. I did. I just couldn't figure out how to get to know him. That's why I came here after the service. I want to know him. I want to know him. He loved Cabernet, Elliot volunteered. He liked walking in the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens when the cherry blossoms started falling from the trees, Jody said. David would say it was smelling perfume. He loved flowers. Jody picked up the rose he brought and placed it on Davy's stool. His favorite opera was De Rosenkavalier, Paul said, taking the rose from Jody, looking at it for a second before saying with a smile, and he never could understand baseball. Paul placed the rose back on the stool. His first boyfriend was named Robert, Ben said. He once played me like a saxophone, Jean said. And then the responses came from all across the bar, from faces familiar and not familiar to John. Memories of Davy poured down like rain. He loved sunsets. He talked about watching the sky go from gold to deep blue, standing in Mallory Square in Key West. He wrote early in the morning, even when he had someone in bed. He would get up quietly and write before dawn. He hated zoos. Autumn was his favorite season. He never ordered spaghetti or linguine in restaurants because it splattered. He used to say, if Satan exists, he sings Andrew Lloyd Webber songs now and forever. He loved chocolate, Hershey bars, this bar. Amen to that, John said. It wasn't impossible to get to know Davy. It just took an effort. He didn't open up easily, I'll give you that. But when you pried away his shell, your brother was an amazing man. He was worth the effort. If you wanted to know your brother, you should have tried visiting him in his world. That's not fair, Alan said. Families are complicated. You're right, John said. But families shouldn't be so complicated that two brothers can't figure out how to talk to one another. I said this bar is part locker room, part confessional, part church. There isn't much difference among any of those three. You go to get clean in all of them. You cleanse your body in a locker room, your conscience in a confessional, and your soul in a church. Alan was troubled, not angry or offended, not moved either. He was like Davy in one way, set in his ways and unlikely to change. In Davy's case, death ended the possibility of change. In Alan's, it was the life he'd embraced decades ago, and with his brother dead, there was little point in turning in a new direction. He finished his drink. Jody walked over to Davy's stool, picked up the rose and handed it to Alan. Take it, not as a remembrance of Davy, but of us, his family. We loved him. I think you did too, or you would not have come here. Stand between his stool and the next one, John said. You will feel Davy, the real Davy, this love between the spaces. It's all for him today. Alan walked over to Jody and stood between him and Davy's stool and took the rose. He felt tears starting to well up, but he stopped them. He felt his brother and did what he had always done, turned to go away. As Alan started to move toward the door, he stopped. He had put a packet on the floor next to his stool when he came in and forgotten about it. He picked it up and handed it to John. I also came because I found this in Davy's apartment. It was marked to you, John at the Crow. Whatever it is, Davy wanted you to have it. Alan handed the sealed packet to John. I don't know what more to say, Alan added. John fixed his eyes on Alan. John could have said something smarky, but he could see Davy in Alan's face. Be well, Alan, John said, extending his right hand. I mean it. He gripped Alan's hand firmly. Come back if you want to learn more about your brother. We're his family. You're his family. We have someone in common. Alan managed a half smile, then turned and left the bar. Let's have one last toast, John said, putting the envelope in the bar. To our brother Davy, across the bar. Davy! Soon afterwards, the men started to file out. Not all at once. They had said what they had come to say about their friend. Some would go to other bars, some to husbands or lovers, some to the quiet of a book, some to the loneliness of an empty room. Some would stay at the Crow until the lights in their eyes dimmed, like the golden sun setting off the horizon in Key West. John surveyed the bar covered in empty or almost empty glasses and beer bottles. Jose had gone down to the basement to get ice. There were a few men at the far corner opposite Tommy. They weren't regulars. John could smell the jack coming off Tommy, who was lost in his whiskey. John picked up the packet from Davy. He carefully opened one end of the envelope and pulled out a printed document. He began reading. On the corner of a not very pretty street in the West Village, a street where Holly Golightly might have turned a trick, where the past, present, and future mix like rye, vermouth, and bitters into a perfect Manhattan, where old men become young, where young men become, and where all are welcomed at the communion rail. There is a bar, and in that bar there is a man, tall and sturdy, who offers all who would drink a glass of salvation. His name is John. John tried to read further, but his eyes had started to blur. This was a story about him and his bar and his buried feelings about Davy, about how sexy Davy looked when he was animated, about how he had wished he hadn't held to this damn code about not getting involved with a customer. And John's lungs filled like water in the ocean did when he had swam out too far. John gasped for air. He put his hand on the bar and looked down. It was faint, barely noticeable. It may have been there for years, for all John knew, and maybe it wasn't him, but he could see the word just to the left of the untouched glass of Cabernet. David. He had signed the bar, after all. John let his fingers work the slight grooves in the wooden surface. He began to cry. Wendy! Tommy's sound brought John back to his reality. He looked up and saw a young man walking into the Crow, a stranger. The young man looked at the bar littered with glasses and beer bottles and walked up to Davy's stool and the untouched glass of Cabernet. Is the seat taken? The man asked. John rubbed his eyes, took the glass of wine and drank it in one large swallow. John looked squarely at the young man. No, the seat is open. He's not coming back.
So good, thank you. I learned it every once a month. I learn this. And I think the last administrative thing I have is to note that we got our act together at the Publishing Triangle relatively late, and the Bureau had basically filled up all their June slots. And then I was like, okay, we'll take June off, fine, in July and August. But by popular demand, it looks like we're going to do a June reading on Wednesday, June 12th. We're going to do it old school though. No, it doesn't look like any virtual component to it. But like we did last year, we'll go up to the Society of Illustrators on 63rd Street on the Upper East Side, which is a great location. But stay tuned and we'll be in touch. If anyone wants to read, we probably will. We won't be broadcasting it like we are this. The audience will be limited, but it worked last year, so let's see if it works this year. And if not, well, there is a bar on the 3rd floor. Our next reader, I wanted her to read for us last month, and she wanted to read for us too. She was a finalist for the Audre Lorde Award for lesbian poetry, but unfortunately she was sick and she could not read her finalist reading. Destiny Hemphill is a chronically ill ritual worker and poet living on the unceded territory of the Anno-Okanichi Band of the Saponi Nation in Durham, North Carolina. A recipient, and I mangled everything probably except for Durham, and I'm sorry. A recipient of fellowships from Naropa University's summer writing program, Kalulu, Tin House, and Kenyon Review's Writers Workshop. Hemphill is the author of the poetry collection Mother World, a devotional for the afterlife from Action Books, published last year, and as I mentioned, a finalist for the Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry. So glad that she's back in action. Please welcome Destiny Hemphill.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Really excited to share space with you. this evening. I wanted to offer a quick visual description. I'm a medium brown skinned Black woman with a short cropped afro, and I have some tiny gold hoops on today. And I'm going to read a few poems from Mother World. And in Mother World, I'm thinking about apocalypse as signaling the end of a world instead of the end of the world in a singular sense. And particularly, I'm thinking about apocalypse as signaling the end of this world that's constituted by anti-Blackness, colonization, capitalism, and meditating on the question, if this world were to retreat, how could we usher in another one through rituals of care that sustain life in the earth? So I'll read a couple poems from the book, and then I'll read a newer piece. This is the portal appears. Before proceeding, an invocation to be read aloud. Scarlet sky, fissured earth, cotton-mouthed. Your hands clasped across your splitting belly. In your craw is the historical entanglement, the half-millennium long planetary ecocide genocide not known as since 1492. You were born into it and it into you, churning, burning, bulging within you. Your ears ring. Soften your craggy breath. Now a hum. Soften your craggy breath. Now a song. Now a song. Yes, a cicada song, burrowing into your skull. Go to the edge. Not the bleach pit of the center, but the edge, the song says. Go to the edge. No, not the hemorrhaged, modeling borders of empire, but beyond, elsewhere. Go to the edge. Look down. Slivers of moonrise so thin they looked like they could slice the soles of your feet. Illumine your path. You follow them. Sometimes you walk, slither, hop along the slivers of moonrise to the edge. Sometimes the knot makes it that you are writhing, convulsing, revolting to the edge nonetheless. The edge be a liminal space. And you know, liminal don't equal marginal. And if you don't know, now you know. But rather liminal be a ritual space, and a ritual space be for summoning and transformation. When you arrive, the fragrance of mulberry trees washes over you. It is dusk. You are not alone here. Others surround you with red threads hanging from their mouths. You feel the knot entangled within you unravel. You all kneel, sink into the edge, pull the threads from each of your own mouths, not always gently, not always gingerly. As you pull, unravel, disentangle, you swoon and sway in somnolence. A summoning hum, then howl comes from your throats. And as you summon other worlds, may other worlds summon you. And as you summon another world, may another world summon you. And as you summon Mother World, may Mother World summon, summon, summon. The next poem I'm going to read is entitled, The Future is Unsettled, a spell for fugitivity. May the settlement of this sentiment shifting, sifting the ruins unsettle you and make no apology for our being untethered to the telluric. From the chasm we were born and from the chasm we birth, the unearthing be shimmering otherworldly. We cicada ourselves, yes, as is the soft dirt that has saved and salvaged us, yes, and also because we are insistent on return. Not all hauntings bad, no, but for you it just might be. If you hear our song as strident, know this, we give thanks to the home found underground and give thanks to the swamps that have engulfed our secrets, marooned us and our wings as secret. We honor the dirt moving underneath, reminding us that to ground and to unground takes practice. If you hear our song as strident, notice the contingency you impose is the contingency that you now oppose. Haunting infractions refract. We're coming with our breath to gust settlements to dust. Here we inhale the stirring before collapse. We exhale and blow your walls down. You're so vain, you think this song ain't about you. Don't you keep our names in your mouth, say, take all names out your mouth. The world you made yours is undone. The chasm expands. We say, let there be flight. Yes, there flight be. And the last poem that I'll read from the manuscript before I read a newer piece is entitled, We Asked Mama Nim, Where's the Mother World? After Ruthie Wilson Gilmore and Evie Shockley. And something to know about this poem is that the spine of the poem that's flush to the left margin borrows a quote from Ruthie Wilson Gilmore about abolition. And the quote is, it's building the future from the present in all of the ways we can. Listen, it's in, not at, in the whistle and hiss, the steam of your breath as you chant, we ready, we coming atop of a jail building in ruins. Yes, it's in your breath and the never dwindling kindle of your fingertips as you reach out and touch the hands of your kindred, the living and your dead, who keep you here, right here, where we offer ourselves as the remains of the remaining future. Keep breathing, don't stop now. Yes, in your breath and in your hands that fend off, defend us from the state that craves our death, seeks to snuff our breath, lick the bones, chew the sinew, and in the same hands tending the fire, tending to the tendons pulled in flight, to bedraggled roots of raised hawthorn trees, to the composting of our present, tending to the dream that what we need and what others have believed to be found nowhere can be found in the now here, like in those moments you said, rent shouldn't exist, so here's a little money for it. Or don't got money for rent, but take all the food you want. Or don't got food, but wrap yourself up in this. Or don't have anything to wear, but here's a card, been thinking of you, and a song written for you, and a milkweed found by chance, and the paper you've been wanting so you can write your mama a letter to say you're okay. Or here's a map of the hidden ways to get back safe. Listen. We've always already been molding and shaping, spinning and folding, birthing and sharing. Can you feel it? In our breath and in our hands, between us, we've got the mother world, the whole mother world in our breath and in our hands. And I'll close with a letter that I wrote to some of my co-editors. So Tomiko Bayer, Elizabeth White, and I co-edited an essay anthology entitled Poetry as Spellcasting, which was also published last year by North Atlantic Books. And we were invited by the publication to RAIN to write letters to each other, contemplating ecology. And so I wrote about ecology, Palestine, and Congo. And after my reading, I also invite you to look up gazafunds.com. And there's a lot of funds for people who are trying to evacuate Gaza right now. And you can click on a link and donate to one of the families who are trying to evacuate. Dear Liz and Tomiko, we had some smoke days here in North Carolina this summer. I remember that the sky took on a putrid yellow color and our breath was constricted. Today, I'm writing this on a cold day of a North Carolina winter and my lungs tingle a bit from the cold. I've been thinking of the headline that celebrated that the earth is cooler because of the slaughter and exploitation of the people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. How easy it is to naturalize and functionalize Black death. The sky is clear here today, and I'm thinking of the white phosphorus bombs piercing the skies of Palestine, how the earth of Palestine now looks different from space, and how the United States and other neocolonial states extracting from Congo and buttressing Israel's military regime consistently use language to not only make genocide expedient, but imperative. So like you, Elizabeth, I'm craving another language, another grammar, rinsing compulsively from my mouth this world's language that in its structure, syntax, inflections, regulations insist on genocide, rinsing my mouth instead with rage, grief, love, and salt. I'm relearning the earth's grammar. Even as a novice, still I know that it teaches that every genocide is ecocide, and that the killing of earth is the killing of earth's children. I know that the water will remember white phosphorus. I know that the earth's gutted bowels will remember the economy that exchanges cobalt for the blood of the DRC's people. And I know the earth and water and atmosphere will remember the horrifying attempts at quote unquote reconciliation, which rely on the false equivalency that power is distributed laterally and evenly. The horrifying attempts at quote unquote reconciliation that obscure what we need to do, reckon with and wreck empire and its occupations. The wind will remember when I honeyed my voice instead of making it corrosive, when I sought ways to be unthreatening and truth-bearing, when I tightened my lips and forced a smile instead of snarling at and hissing at and biting the state and its agents that demand gratitude that they have not killed all of my co-conspirators, all of my loved ones, all of me yet. I'm remoting my ligaments and tendons to meet this grammar. My autonomic functions have been hijacked and numbed and whittled away so that parts of me believe that it might be easier, better to be in harmony, attunement, and regulation in concert with the state, which is the death chorus of empire. I'm still relearning the language of the earth, but I can discern free the Democratic Republic of Congo, free Palestine, free Sudan, free Haiti, power and liberation to all oppressed life, free the earth, and that to be a serious student of this planet, we must be a danger to this world. Much love, Destiny. Thank you all.
That's me. Thank you so much. It's so great. Worth the wait. Thank you. And I really see something I need to. When this has been bugging me, and I did this. This is a tic tac. When you're coming here with coffee breath, and you're like, but then I don't have tic tacs often, but when I do, I start eating them like candy. And of course, I bounced one across here 30 minutes ago, and I can't take my eyes off of it. So now it's going to go to end up in the washing machine. I'm really excited about our next reader because I've been watching his self-promotion. That's not a bad thing, by the way, on social media for the better part of a year, I think. So let's get to him. A successful white-collar professional by day, working in healthcare as a project management executive, Robert P. Graves is an openly gay man living in Buffalo, New York. You still in Buffalo, Rob? Okay. I'm from Rochester originally, so I knew I loved your accent. Through his many years of therapy, he learned to forgive others and accept his family and friends for who they are. Now he's turned the focus inward, forgiving himself for the years of reckless behavior and finally accepting himself as he is, a successful, healthy, gay man living with bipolar depression. His 2022 memoir, I, Rob Graves, has received accolade. And I want to wait, can I back up? Because when I was looking for your bio earlier today, I guess I'd never really realized that I, Claudius was written by Robert Graves, and I assume that is, okay, good, all right. Got it now. I, Rob Graves, has received accolades for showing how that forgiveness and acceptance has brought healing and recovery. Please welcome Rob Graves.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it's the perfect month for me to be here talking about my bipolar disorder that went untreated for 22 years. It morphed into some rage events that I'll read about, and it also morphed into an anonymous sex addiction that lasted 22 years, the height of the AIDS epidemic. So I'll read a little bit about that. But first I want to read the preface because the title of the book got some interesting commentary in the media. Such an odd title for a book. I, Rob Graves. But I cannot take credit for the naming of this book. My dear friend Matt said that I must name it, I, Rob Graves, after I told him what I had been dealing with for the last 20 plus years. We were on vacation together with a group of friends, drinking poolside, when I announced that I would be writing this book. I was not going to hide any longer and confided in Matt and my other friends. They could not have been more supportive. And for that, I thank them. Matt and I were chatting about our lives, and he turned to me and said, "You know what you need to name the book?" I encouraged him to continue. He said, "I, Rob Graves." It was an ongoing joke. I always got packages addressed to I, Rob Graves whenever he sent me a card. But it was more than that. I was putting myself in harm's way for 22 years, and I was robbing the grave of my body. After 22 years, I realized I needed to stop, and he encouraged me to keep the title as I, Rob Graves, and damn to the naysayers. So many of what I'm about to read is going to be local for you all, because it's my New York City chapter, and I always came before gas prices were out of control and flights were out of control. I would come here on a Wednesday and just enjoy the city because I could get here for $39 round trip on JetBlue.
Yeah.
What is not to love about New York City? The first time I went there, I worked for the bank, and it was an instant love affair. Hell, I even tried to move there in 2001, and you know how that worked out. So instead of living there, I settled for frequent day and weekend trips with my friends Ed and Matt from Rochester. Sometimes on a whim, we would fly in on a Wednesday morning, first flight out, and be in the city for a day of fun. We would stop at the famed Essa Bagel on 3rd Avenue for breakfast and plan our day out. Usually it was a museum stop, MoMA or the Guggenheim or the Met. We would stop at TKTS to see what was playing at the 2 o'clock matinee on Broadway, followed by a quick bite to eat, and then off to happy hour at Splash nightclub. The bartenders were all hot, well blessed, and wore nothing but tight underwear. The drinks were cheap, and the bartenders knew how to pour a great cocktail. We would turn into Cinderella at the stroke of 8 o'clock, just in time to catch a cab to Penn Station and the Long Island Railroad to JFK for our 10:30 flight home. It was always a long day, but always a fantastic way to spend the day with cherished friends. Most of the time, I knew my drinking limit when I went to New York City, especially on those random Wednesdays when I had to make sure We were sober enough to get to the airport on time. There were other times when I was not so well behaved, like the weekend that they were running the New York City Marathon. Matt had received a special invitation to run the marathon because he had raised money back home for a local breast cancer support group whose founder was also running the race. It would be her second time. The first time she had run the race after finishing chemotherapy. To say the city was alive with energy, that would have been a gross understatement. Everywhere where you turn, there were runners with their athletic supporters, as we like to call them. Race day came and Matt left early to go to Staten Island where the race started. Matt's sisters and I, along with Ed and our friend Lisa, who lived in New York City, would run around the city trying to find Matt in the race to give him support and any needed supplies like pain meds or Band-Aids or anything else he might need along the race. Being an athletic supporter in New York City Marathon was great fun. The following year, Matt was able to run the marathon again, and this time the event fell on Halloween weekend, so we decided to make it an extra long weekend. Matt ran the marathon with a great time that year, so we were all ready to celebrate. The day after the marathon was Halloween, and we all brought costumes to wear to the bars. My costume was a leather daddy, which was not an actual costume for me, as I had begun to dabble in the leather subculture of the gay community. We started the night out at some regular neighborhood gay bars in Lower Manhattan. I was bored with the scene and wanted some excitement. I had been drinking steadily and feeling no pain, as they say. I decided to go to New York City's best leather bar, the Eagle. It was impossible to find a taxi, so I decided to walk the 20 minutes to the bar, which would help me sober up just a little bit to drink some more at the Eagle. I walked in, up the stairs to the main bar area, and when I was there, I was in my element. Hot men dressed in head-to-toe leather. I made my way to the bar, which was a good 3 people deep along its entire length. I ordered a beer, and when I finally made my way through the crowd to the bartender, I walked around and found a post to lean against and took the sights in and the sounds. The music was hot that night. There was something for everyone, whether muscle daddies, big bear daddies, twink submissives, dominatrix, dominants, you name it, it was there. If you could not tell by the physical appearance, if they were a sub or a dom, you could always tell by the strap on their bicep or wrist. Left side equals dom, right side equals sub. It was getting to be late, and I had not met anyone to feed my mania that was raging inside of me. It was just as I was about to leave when a beautiful muscle daddy caught my eye. He was standing alone, and I waited for a while before I walked over and introduced myself. We made small talk for a while when I noticed his growing blessing in his black jockstrap. Now I was not a rookie any longer and knew what that meant. I asked him if there was somewhere we could go that I could take care of his little problem. He grabbed me by the back of the neck and led me into the back room of the bar. There I saw what I could only describe as a big leather orgy. It was terrific, and the voyeur in me was in heaven. My dom quickly guided me down to my knees, and he revealed a considerable blessing adorned with a Prince Albert that was very thick, and a very thick ring around the base of his blessing. I went to work like a good submissive should. The scene was hot, and I loved every minute of it. My dom asked if I liked it rough, and I nodded in agreement. Then, when things got real, he took total control, and began to force himself down my throat to the base, my teeth hitting the steel ring. I gagged in unbridled pleasure. His huge hands were cupped around my head, and he was forcing himself in and out of my mouth, my face hitting his chain link harness that went from the base of his blessing up to and around his waist and turned into a chest harness. Sorry. There went on for a while. He finally let a huge groan and exploded all over my chest and face. I knew this was coming by the growth of his blessing down my throat. I took out my blessing and began to take care of my business. I exploded onto the floor just as he was wiping his blessing on my face to make sure that I knew he was the boss. The next day I woke up and went to the bathroom, only to find that I had a black eye from the event due to the previous evening. I guess my job had been a little too rough. Now I was going to have to explain this to my friends. I could not tell them the real story. I texted Lisa, who was meeting us for lunch and some sightseeing that final day in New York City. I wrote, "Bring cover up, don't ask questions." Matt woke up and found me checking my eye in the mirror of the bathroom and asked what had happened and if I was all right. I concocted a story that I fell down the stairs at the Eagle and landed face first into a muscle daddy's chain link harness. It was believable. It was believable, and it was the story I told for the rest of the trip. It made for remarkable stories and great mocking from my friends. While the event of the previous evening had left me with a black eye, it did not stop me from seeking my next great high, regardless of the risk. Like many addicts, the greater the risk, the greater the high. While the black eye left me with a temporary physical scar, the constant emotional scars from my addiction were starting to weigh on me. I was in a constant fear that I was HIV positive. Yet, even the fact that the fear of death did not stop me from continuing my quest for my next great high. A year later, Matt asked if I wanted to go down to visit Lisa for a few drinks. I jumped at the chance to go. Any chance to go to New York City, I would go. I did not have any firm plans while we were there, other than to spend some quality time with Lisa. Lisa was living in Jersey City at the time, and it was just a short walk from the path train, which could drop us right off in Lower Manhattan, close to all the gay bars, and one of our favorite bars in New York City, the Cowgirl on Hudson. We would start the day there for their famous margaritas and their famous beef nachos served in a bag of Fritos corn chips. Yeah, it was great. It was a great day. I mean, what's not to love? On special this day was their prickly pear margarita, a frozen concoction of goodness. They were so good. We were drinking them for most of the day. We got lost in our conversation, catching up on current events and old times. The type of conversation that only the best friends can have, where the hours go by in minutes. Time did not get away from us, and the afternoon turned to evening, so we decided to move from the bar to have dinner at Cowgirl. After dinner, we headed to the area around the famed Stonewall Inn, where there were many gay bars. The walk did us good and sobered us up a bit. We stopped along the way at several bars to rest, have a cocktail, and check out the locals. We were all beyond the point of no return when it came to our sobriety. We made our way to Stonewall to pay our respects to our elders before us who had fought for the civil rights that we cherish today. Matt went to the bar and ordered much needed water for all of us. he came back and said, our respects have been paid and now we're leaving. Because the 3 bottles of water just cost him $30, including tip. I was outraged at the fact that we had been price gouged by such an iconic establishment. I was not having it. I took my water up to the bartender, asked for a refund, and explained to him that we did not realize we were in such a tourist trap. The bartender did not appreciate my commentary and proceeded to berate me in front of the whole bar. Well, this was the wrong thing to do for him, so it sent me into a total rage. I started to scream at him. I opened the bottle of water and threw $8 of water at him, hitting him straight on. I ran to the table, grabbed my jacket, and ran out of the bar, leaving Matt and Lisa, who were dumbfounded at what they had just witnessed. The bartender, who was also in a rage, ran out of the bar behind me, caught me, tackled me, and we proceeded to have a drunken knockdown brawl right there in front of the famed Stonewall Inn. The crowd outside broke us up, but not before some police officers nearby took notice. I ran in the opposite direction as fast as I could. The next thing I knew, I was on the 14th Street PATH train, boarding a northbound train for fear that the police might be looking for me. I sat on the train, collecting my thoughts. What the fuck just happened back there? How did something so trivial, like a bottle of water, set me off into a rage so massive that I ended up in a barroom brawl with a bartender at the Stonewall? I got off the train at the last stop, 34th Street, called Matt to let him know that I was safe and to apologize for what had gone down back at the bar. He let me know where he was, and I asked that he wait there for me. I went back on the next southbound train. When I arrived, I was met with an icy cold reception by both Matt and Lisa. They were both very upset over what had transpired, as was I. I felt that the best thing I could do was to leave and head back to Jersey City. I was still very drunk, and when I got to Jersey City, I realized that I did not know how to get to Lisa's apartment. And I also did not have a key to get into her place. I was so drunk and needed to sleep it off. There was a hotel not far from the station, so I stumbled into the reception and asked for a room for the night. I was lucky. There were some rooms left. I put down my credit card, then passed out on the bed without so much as removing a stitch of clothing, not even my shoes. I awoke the next day to a dead cell phone and no charger to be found. Not even a loaner charger at the front desk. What was I going to do now? I needed coffee and some time to think. The coffee helped. I realized I was just a few blocks from Lisa's apartment, and I found my way back to her stoop. It was still early, and I realized that I could not get in. I rang the bell a few times, but no luck. I sat there for an hour and decided to yell out Lisa's name to see if I'd get any response. It worked. Lisa came to the window, told me to come up. We chatted about the night before. I apologized for my behavior. I was lucky, and they forgave me in the days to come. Now, I needed to forgive myself, and that's just something I'm still working on.
Thank you, Rob Graves. And our final reader, James Pauley, was born and raised in a small town in southwestern Michigan. He began his career as a flight attendant in 1978, a job he continues to enjoy. And if you look, I believe on his website, certainly in biographical information online, He's had, I think, about 3 dozen different jobs. So, he definitely well-rounded. Throughout his life, he's worn many other hats as well. We'll see. He's co-author of Granny and the Gay Guy with best-selling author Charlene Potterbaum, and his book Bumpy Rides and Soft Landings: Stories of Coming Out, Flying High, and Not Learning to Play the Piano, recently was named the silver winner for humor by the Independent Book Publishers Association in their Benjamin Franklin Awards. Jim lives with his spouse Rich in Indiana. Please welcome Jim Poe.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Rob Graves. Tough act to follow.
Yeah.
What a blessing you have. I mean, so I'm reading from my iPad because like Rob and Alfred, I have my Medicare card. And the font's bigger, and in this case, size does matter. So this is from a chapter. Now, the book that you said, Granny and the Gay Guy, has been totally revamped, repackaged, being marketed as a new book. Just came out May 1st. The new title is Unconditional Friendship: Messages from a Colorful Granny and an Off-Colored Gay Guy, written with my friend and co-author Charlene Potterbaum. So the first, I'm doing 2 readings from this one and another book. So 2 short readings. This one, just as a preface, it's a chapter that when I was in the 4th grade, I had a teacher I'll call Miss S, who was larger than life. She was also she was also very progressive and way ahead of her time. This was in the early 1960s, but she had this rather large, for the time, black and white television set hooked up to a huge antenna that was perched above her classroom. It was a kinky class. Every week we would watch a science show, and twice a week we had live Spanish lessons. She took this very seriously, as did I. But during one lesson, my best friend, Sandy, a tomboy who sat directly behind me, decided it would be much more exciting to flick my ears than to learn Spanish. On the 6th flick, I turned around and quietly said, "Ow." That's it, nothing more, just an almost inaudible, "Ow," but that's all it took. And here's what followed. Although Miss S, who was sitting at her desk, seemed mesmerized by the senor on TV, she whipped around and yelled, "Jimmy, get up here now." I slowly got to my feet and, shaking every step of the way, gingerly made my way to the front of the classroom. How many times have I told you we do not talk during our Spanish lesson? I've warned you students before and you don't listen, so I'm going to have to punish you now. I swallowed hard as I waited for my sentencing. I want you to sit under my desk for the remainder of the lesson. I slowly looked from her to the desk, wondering how it was humanly possible for the 2 of us to share such a small space. When I said earlier that she was larger than life, I wasn't exaggerating. How on earth am I going to fit under there, I worried. Well, she was the teacher and I was the student, so I reluctantly crawled under the 3-sided desk. There's something else I should mention that might have some relevance to this story. Miss S had a penchant for spicy foods, which often talked back or simply came for an unexpected visit, especially after lunch. Unfortunately for me, this was after lunch. And lunch on this particular day had been sloppy joes, baked beans, corn chips, and applesauce. Further explanation seems unnecessary. Once I wriggled my way under the desk and got comfortable, Miss S scooted her chair in closer, which made a grinding sound as it scraped across the tile floor. The Spanish lesson continued as Senor began. "Okay, estudiantes míos. I will start counting and then I want you to finish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then he stopped, waiting for his unforeseen classroom to finish. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Miss S bellowed, bouncing up and down excitedly in her solidly built chair. She continued to laugh and stomp her feet with each correct answer. Once the commotion died down, silence permeated my makeshift prison, or un momento that is, until a new sound slowly erupted. At first, I was impressed and somewhat awed that Miss S had learned to trill her R so effortlessly. But then as the sound and urgency grew more frantic, I realized even though the sound was coming from Miss S, it wasn't coming from her mouth. I was in a human gas chamber. I knew I had to take action if I wanted to live through this experience and possibly write about it many years later. I desperately searched my enclosed cell, hoping to find an air hole. As my eyes darted back and forth, I suddenly saw a sliver of daylight near the floor. There was maybe a 1-inch gap at the base of the desk. My mind went into overdrive as I wondered how I could make my way to the light and the fresh air. For the first time in my short life, I was thankful for my full lips. Until that point, I had always been very self-conscious of them. Oftentimes other kids made fun of me because of them. But this was a moment of true acceptance for me. My lips, a former source of embarrassment, suddenly became my best friends, my lifesavers. My lungs felt like they were on fire as I tried to hold my breath. I had sucked in every bit of remaining fresh air just seconds before the stench engulfed me, and I couldn't hold it much longer. And then, almost as though they had a mind of their own, my lips took over. They quickly moved and meandered their way to the slit at the bottom of the desk. Once they were in position, I puckered up like a fish, sucking in massive amounts of clean, unpolluted air. Thanks to them, I won the battle against the walloping gas-filled senorita. As I sat there panting, I heard the chair laboriously screech back as Miss S said, "Okay, Jimmy, you can come out now." I slowly crawled out from my torture chamber and shakily rose to face Miss S's belly. "I trust you've learned your lesson, haven't you, Jimmy?" "Sí, senorita," I squeaked. "No more talking during our Spanish lesson. ¿Entiendes?" "Sí, senorita, no entiendo mucho." And I never talked out of turn during my Spanish lessons again, even when Sandy flicked my ears. Besides my lips, there's one more thing I'm eternally grateful for. I'm so thankful the school didn't start having Taco Day until the following year. Otherwise, I might not be here to tell the story. The next one is from a book that was published last year, Bumpy Rides and Soft Landings, Stories of Coming Out, Flying High, and Not Learning to Play the Piano. I was a flight attendant, or as I now prefer to be called, a goddess of the sky, for 40 some years. And during that time, this chapter is about several years that I flew my airlines flights from Chicago to New Delhi, India. The title of the chapter is So Sorry, and I might be developing a theme compared to the first chapter, but I'll let you decide. This was one of the most memorable. Delhi, I don't know if anyone's ever been to India, but it's an incredible experience. It's very colorful. It's just, I don't know, it's just the energy there I love. The flights, not so much. Always full of very interesting characters. The flights are very long, grueling, like 16 hours, but a lot of things happen that are good for future books. This one was one of the most memorable and could have possibly been one of the most embarrassing. One of my favorite things about flying to India was the food, not only at the hotel restaurant, but also on the airplane. Now, 3 words you'll rarely see together are best, airplane, and food, but the food really was good. It also helped that I had become friends with Ravi, one of the catering representatives. Ravi would bring us leftover food from Air India and Emirates flights. So on the way home, we'd gorge ourselves with tandoori chicken, biryani, aloo gobi, dal, palak paneer, and naan. One night, Ravi brought us enough food to feed a small Indian village. So to be polite, we ate every morsel. The next morning, we arrived in Chicago on schedule at 5:00 a.m. I had a global entry car, so I was able to clear customs quickly and catch my 6:00 bus to South Bend. Given that I was extremely tired that day, I hoped to take a good nap on the 3-hour bus ride. When I boarded the bus, I was surprised to see that it was almost full. Typically, there were only a handful of other passengers on this early morning run. I spotted 3 of my colleagues who just returned from Beijing, so I sat near them. We settled back and began sharing stories about our trips. Suddenly, I felt a funny gurgling in my gut. I tried ignoring it, but it refused to be ignored. It got louder and more urgent. I broke into a cold sweat, wondering why the bus had to be full. There was no way I was going to use that tiny bathroom with people sitting so close to it. The door was nothing more than a thick sheet of cardboard. The bus made 3 stops en route to South Bend, with the first one being about an hour from O'Hare. As we headed down I-294 toward Indiana, the rumbling, cramping, and urgency intensified. One of my colleagues said I looked pale and asked if I felt all right. I lied and assured her that I was fine, but inside I was praying I didn't have an accident. Finally, after what seemed like hours, we arrived at the first stop. Miraculously, every single person besides me got off the bus. There was a lot of luggage to unload, so while the driver was doing that, I bolted to the tiny bathroom and exploded like Mount Vesuvius. After several eruptions, I returned to my seat, relieved and ecstatic to have survived a case of Delhi belly. The bus driver, a boisterous Black woman I knew well from my frequent rides, boarded the bus after unloading the last of the luggage. She walked toward me and said, "Looks like it's just you and me, babe." Then, much to my horror, she proceeded to the back to make sure there were no stowaways in the nasty bathroom. As soon as I heard the cardboard door open, she bellowed, "Hoo-wee! Oh my God! Oh Lordy! Whoa! What the hell?" I turned slightly just in time to see her next to the bathroom with her arms flailing. This continued for a few more flails and "oh my gods" before she ran up the aisle toward me wide-eyed as she hollered, "Holy Jesus, it's following me." I was dying 1,000 deaths at that moment, knowing this would probably go down as my all-time most embarrassing moment. Then she looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Why? Why?" I was ready to respond, "Because I had to go." But before I could, she cut me off. "Why do they do that? Why do they do that on my bus? Then they get off and leave us here to suffer with it." I closed my mouth, no longer feeling the need to fess up to anything. "I don't know," I replied, shaking my head as I sat back in my seat, hoping to still catch a little nap. I smiled and said a thank you to the volcano gods, knowing things could have been a whole lot messier.
Jim Polly. We started with it, with like some really, great trans fiction and ended on poop humor. So once again, this is not your father's publishing triangle. Please do consider becoming a member. Please follow us on social media, come to our events. Look for our June 12th information on our June 12th reading. That'll be, again, it won't be a virtual one. Where we're going does not have that capacity, but we did this last year and we had a lot of fun just getting 25 people in a room. And it's good times. Sorry for the Tic Tac incident earlier. I want to thank everyone who's here and who's watching at home. And we know we have a good reader. We know we have a lot of viewers at home. So I want to thank Greg and Greg Newton and Donnie Jokum from the Bureau of General Services Career Division, and Kevin, who I left hanging 2 months ago. Sorry, Kevin. I have not really forgotten you. I just got really busy, but we'll get together for a drink soon and we'll talk about ways we can work together. Because Kevin doesn't only volunteer here, we're going to make him a volunteer for the publishing triangle. Thank you once again to Emily Jo, Faye Jacobs, David Santos Donaldson, Alfred Doblin, Destiny Hempel, Robert P. Graves, and Jim Polly. It was amazing reading. Thank you, everybody. All right.
Good night, online viewers.